I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you, and I'm very sorry that I'm not with you. The Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg was, for the practice, and specifically for myself, a major piece of design, a most exciting piece of design. The program for the Court of Human Rights was complex and extremely interesting, and in fact challenging. Ivan, who is here talking for me, with me, who is the director in charge of the building, will explain in much greater detail than I can now.
The festival, les Journées de l'Architecture, is designed to introduce architecture to the general public. This year's theme is enlightened architecture. Richard, what was your first encounter with architecture?
I was very fortunate. I was born in 1933, a long time ago, in Florence, with Brunelleschi's dome right in front of the window of the apartment my parents lived in. And that certainly has given me a vision. And Brunelleschi is probably my, should we say, favorite artist, architect, engineer.
Give us an example of architecture that has affected you emotionally.
I don't think one ever has one emotion. One has lots of emotions, but certainly in terms of today, when we have lately heard of the bombing of Palmyra, the great temple, the great Greco-Roman temple of 2,700 years ago, it moved my heart. I had the good fortune of being in Syria about 10 years ago, and I can think of nothing more beautiful.
Which building for you would best illustrate the theme, enlightened architecture?
In my early 30s, Renzo Piano and I, and over Arab's Peter Rice, had the good fortune of winning an international competition for the Pompidou Center, then called the Beaubourg. I had no idea what we were entering. It was a tremendously complicated building in the center of Paris. A museum, a library, a music center, a design center. But the heart of this was the idea of a place for all people, all ages, all creeds. It's a cross, I remember these words well, a cross between New York Times Square, the liveliness, the populism, and the British Museum, serious and a study center.
The world is undergoing profound changes and people are forced to leave their country, beset by climate change or conflict from another age. For a humanist such as yourself, do these events drive you to despair at times? Do you think architecture can make a difference?
I'm an architect because I think architecture makes a difference. Architecture is about shelter, and I see shelter together with, shall we say, health, together with food, together with education, as being one of the major primary drivers of society. And certainly it plays a major part in culture, and culture has continued since the beginning of mankind. So I think we should be able to meet the needs of today, the needs of people who haven't got shelter, therefore very low cost. Often it means having a lot of buildings for little money, but well designed. I think, for instance, that's one of those areas one we can all work in. But there are many areas where we need to develop a language in architecture which gives what the people need.
The issues faced by architects are increasing in complexity. They know that their work will have a social and environmental impact. What advice would you give a young architect?
Architecture is a very exciting and very complex profession. There's much more to architecture than architecture, I often say. In other words, it's not to do with decorating a building or even just design. It's the implication of the relationship between society and what you're trying to solve in a building. For instance, the law courts are not just a palace for justice. It's actually it's a school for understanding what law is about. And that's what excites me, is it's the invisible part of the program that is the challenge, and that gives the form to the building. It's also about relationship with the landscape. Again, the Courts of Human Rights has this beautiful river, this bridge, and it follows very much the form of that landscape. That's what gives it the concept. And then again, we want to make it the building legible, so you can see very easily the difference between the two great court buildings, the transparent entrance hall with a great glass outside with this beautiful red staircase going through. All these elements add up to a whole, and then the sort of the tail of the building, which is basically where the offices are.